Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast, brought to you by Trulytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. This week on the show, I have Sten Morgan of Legacy Investment Planning based in Nashville, Tennessee with me. Sten is also the author of 7 Mindsets of Success, what you really need to do to achieve rapid top level success. Now, one of the things that happened to get Sten on this show is what I always ask, right? Somebody reached out to me. Sten's publicist, Erica Campbell, reached out. Shout out to Erica. And she pitched Sten in the typical publicist email. Hey, you should have Sten on the show. I think it'd be a good fit for the Modern Financial Advisor audience. He can talk about this topic and this topic. And I'm like, this sounds really cool. Sten does sound interesting, but let me try to find a fit here. And then I read down a little lower that Sten grew his practice from 0 to top producer territory in less than 5 years. I'm like, oh, now this is cool because to me, that's impressive, right? And we're looking for more of that in this industry, right? It's one of the challenges we have is that many advisors come in and they wash out. They don't make it to year 5. And Sten and I are going to talk about that in a lot more detail in this episode. But the thing that was really impressive to me about that for Sten was he wasn't a mid-career changing advisor, right? He didn't have 20 years in some other industry, leave the industry, become an advisor, and was able to go talk to all of his executive friends and bring them on, right, as clients. He was actually fresh out of college. And then once he kind of got things started in the very early days, in that first year and a half or so, he moved from Portland, Oregon, where he grew up, to Nashville, Tennessee, where he really didn't have any roots, save for a couple of uncles who, weren't in the finance industry, right? So he was starting fresh in a brand new place. And yet he accomplished something that we want all young or new advisors to accomplish. He came up to speed incredibly fast. That's important for our industry, right? Because we know that there's a coming wave of transition for advisors. We're going to lose, some estimates say, 40% of the advisors in the next decade. We need to backfill those advisors with youth and new advisors. They don't necessarily have to be young, but we need new advisors coming in to take over for the advisors who are exiting. And so this is really, really important. The stuff that we're going to cover here with Sten, he's got a lot of great advice, a lot of great experiences that he's willing to share. And as you can tell, he wrote a book about it and he's doing some consulting for other advisors and sharing his wisdom there. So really, really cool stuff. I think you're going to love this episode of the podcast. Before we get to the conversation with Sten, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever you like to podcast jam on, or YouTube. By the way, YouTube is killing it. The first episode video style that we published up there with Tony Steek from Advise at Naviplan, probably at the time you're listening to this, it'll be a couple of weeks ago. But the first 4 days, over 1,300 views of that episode. And by the time you see it, of course, a lot more. So really, really cool stuff. I think I'm going to be leaning a little more heavily into YouTube for a while to see what it does for the show and how it helps us grow the audience. Okay. Also, make sure you send in your questions and suggestions for topics or guests to podcast@trulytics.com or hit us up by swinging by trulytics.com and using that contact form. Or if you like, feel free to ping us on the socials, right? Trulytics is active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Of course, you can always ping me. I'm at Mike Langford everywhere, okay? Your comments and engagement are always welcome. That's how we get people on the show, right? Ask Erica, ask Sten. That's how Sten's on the show. All right, let's get to it with Sten Morgan. Sten Morgan, buddy, good morning to you. So excited to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this now. I think over a month that we started planning this. So it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Good to be here, Mike. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, this is awesome. So, when Erica reached out saying, hey, I think Sten might be a good fit for the show, I went and read your bio. I read some of the things she shared, and it was really interesting. A lot of the topics she's like, oh, Sten can talk about this. He can talk about this. There's some interesting stuff here. He's got all this great experience. I'm like, I want to talk to him for a completely different reason. I think it was really nice. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's like, in your bio, one of the most prominent things is the fact that you have grown a successful practice very rapidly at a young age. And to me, that's a really important topic to talk about. Like, how did you do that? And then, more importantly, how can others learn from that? And it doesn't, the fact that you're young is cool. But it's the fact that you did it in a compressed amount of time, that you came up to
Yep.
speed quickly, is actually more important to me. It's less important that you're a younger dude.
Yep.
So I thought maybe a fun way to start would be with your start. Like
Yeah.
you came into the industry in '08. Congratulations on having your amazing timing, by the way.
Yes, I know. That's right.
That's kind of like me. I graduated business school in 2001 as a .com bust was happening.
Perfect.
So you and me have something in common with our really crappy timing.
No, it does work. I look back at the timeline and I'm like, all right, there was something to that helped for sure.
Oh yeah, oh man. Well, it's funny. You could always look back. That is the best time, right? To come in when things are depressed a little bit. But you first joined Northwestern Mutual. I'm looking at your IMDb, LinkedIn, and you were in Oregon, and then you quickly moved to Raymond James in Nashville. I think your start's going to be really interesting because you came in during that economically challenging time, and many new advisors probably washed out and were maybe a little afraid to jump in. So maybe you could talk a little bit about those early days of the business.
You bet. The truest story is that I took an internship at Northwestern Mutual because it was the only internship I found that was going to pay me $100 a week to show up to a meeting. I had no intention of being a business owner. I was pretty risk averse. I was raised by a single mom. And so it was like the whole goal in life was just to be comfortable, get a steady job, pay your bills without worrying about it. And you're set. So I'm thankful that I stumbled into the industry. I enjoyed money, wanted to help people in a different way, and took the internship and just learned a lot really quickly about what it meant to be a financial advisor, And so starting at an insurance agency and then jumping to Raymond James because I thought securities were the sexy side of the business. I was like, insurance is good. We all need it. But man, investments, that's where it's at. And was really exposed to that world, but also saw it was, in my opinion, all we thought about every day was investments. I was like, I think there's other stuff out here. So I saw insurance heavy, I saw investment heavy. And so then when I decided to start my firm at roughly 24 years old, I was like, I want to kind of be different. I want to be a planner, and which most of us are to some extent, but the core of our business is still sales. We have to sell something at the end of the day. And so at a young age, I think I decided I want to pick who I want to be and just go for it. And I want to be a comprehensive financial planner that has an insurance background, investment background. I think if I package that and communicate it the right way, it'll be different.
It's really interesting. How did you, it's funny, I had Matt Reiner on the show not too long ago. He's the founder of Benjamin, but he also grew up in the industry. Like his father had built a very, very large RIA. And so Matt was kind of like, from a kid, kind of spoon fed being in the industry. But, he talked about how he was somewhat nervous about interacting with these older clients who have a lot of money, and here he's a young dude who has no money getting started.
Yeah.
How did you, how did you overcome that? How do you? How does a 24-year-old guy start his own firm and then sit across the table from somebody who hey, listen, I've got 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever it is to invest, and you're like, I'm just getting my start here, man. How did you overcome that? I mean, there's a bit of anxiety, I would imagine, and you have to harden the muscles there, if you want to call it that.
Oh yeah, I think I've realized that I didn't want to try to fake it because they knew when they walked in. I saw their faces when they realized, this person could be my grandchild or my son. I think as soon as I realized that I was the product and I stopped talking about products as the product, and I got my CFP as quick as I could, CHFC, and I just started studying tax laws. I realized that results are really what matter. And I think our business at times leans really heavy on relationship, which is important. But I think I read a study, this was in actually Tony Robbins' Unshakable book, that 42% of ultra high net worth clients believe their advisor focuses more on products than their needs. And I was shocked. I was 46%. That's huge. What that told me is that those clients are just waiting for somebody to come that's going to add true value and kind of change their perspective on it. And so I didn't get a lot of swings at big clients when I was young. So when I did get the swing, I knew I had to bring my A game. So when I realized that results are what matter, not relationship, and I would get in front of a client and I could show them that I could save them $50,000 with some good ideas, I would take a client that was 60 years old from a Merrill Lynch advisor they've had for 30 years or their UBS guy, because it was like, I'm adding so much value that whether they go to church together, their kids play soccer together, while that relationship is important, if I can save them so much money, they're going to make the switch. As soon as that took hold inside of me, I realized that even though I'm 24, 25, 26, I can still get those clients.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's like, yes, relationships do matter, and very often the client is picking the advisor because they've connected with the advisor. To your point, the reason products matter less is, look, everybody has the same products for the same amount, basically, right? To some extent, we are in a commodity industry. There's insurance products. Everybody's got investment products. All of us have. Every firm has access to the same stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how else are you, differentiating yourself? Yes, relationship, showing you have a high care meter, if you will, great bedside manner, and all that type of stuff. But to your point, are you actually solving the problem that the client has, right? Like, hey, listen, I need to save money in taxes. Hey, listen, I need to help my kids. I want to pay for their college, but I don't want it to break me. That type of stuff, right?
Yeah, put yourself in the client's shoes. If they needed the best doctor in the country, or they needed the best lawyer, personally, I wouldn't care if that doctor had the worst bedside manner or the lawyer was just obnoxious to work with. If they were the best, I would still work with them.
Yeah.
So I agree, relationships important. You want to be able to connect to be friends with your clients, but if you're just that good at what you do, you'll still get the business.
Yeah.
Sales tactics are great. Your client experience, onboarding, offboarding, I feel like we've dialed that in as well. But what gets the client at the end of the day is that you can show them the value. And so one thing I've really tried to focus on is quantifying the value. And what I mean by that is, if I sit with a client and I have a tax idea for them, and the tax idea might save them $5,000 this year, I don't tell them it's a $5,000 issue I'm solving. I stretch it over 10 years. And so I tell them this is actually a $50,000 problem we're solving. Because clients don't solve small problems, they solve big problems. And so it's our responsibility to show them how important our advice is to them. And so I think we've gotten really good at that. So when I show a client, hey, if you make this change, it'll save you $100,000 over the next 10 years. All of a sudden, that's a big problem to them.
I love that. It is really funny because, when I was studying finance and accounting, right, back in college, that was the big distinction when the finance professor, intro to finance, right, 101 type deal, is like, finance focuses on the future value of money, right? Like understanding, like we're planning for the future here. Accounting looks at point in time, like what has already happened or what's happened. What does the world look like right now, right? Very often, though, financial advisors don't spend as much time talking about the impact of savings over the course of a client's life, right? They talk about the impact of the investment, right? Hey, if you invest, $1 million now, that $1 million will grow to whatever, or $100,000, it'll grow to whatever. We spend a lot of time on that concept, right? The miracle of compounding. We spend relatively little time talking about the impact of a dollar saved today, right? Of reducing taxes, of reducing spend in one area or whatever. So I really like that approach of putting it in perspective of the total impact, right? The potential impact over a longer time.
Yep. I think the other side of it is your conversation with the client. I think too many advisors are talking too much about themselves in the first or second meeting. The client wouldn't even be in your office if they didn't think you know what you're doing or that your firm had some credibility. And so I remember back in my early days, it was like, here's our story, three-legged stool. Like, it was half of the meeting initially was about us. And then we'd say, well, tell me about you. And you really didn't have enough time to get to the meat of it. Yeah. So I read a great book. Disclaimer, if you go to Amazon, go to business books before you type this in, but the book's Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. But it changed the way I thought about my meetings, because in the book, it essentially, read it if you haven't, but to kind of sum up kind of my main takeaway, it was give away your best stuff right away. So when I have my first meeting with a client, I learn about them, but I get up on the whiteboard and I start giving away great ideas. Because all of a sudden they're starting to feel this is a different experience than sitting down, here's our folder, here's our firm, here's how we get paid. They've done that 5 times already. But why the clients leave from our meeting is like, we didn't even talk about them. They just started giving us great ideas, and they've already showed us 2 ideas that'll save us $20,000 in the next 2 months. And I think there's a fear of advisors that they're going to take those ideas and do them with somebody else or try to do it on their own. That never happens. Yeah. The meeting ends by them saying, what else you got?
Yeah.
And they want to sign up. And so I think it's the whole experience that we need to change as advisors of what's the client. Are we quantifying the issue, and are we presenting it in a unique way?
I think there's a reason why that never happens, by the way, or rarely happens. I'm sure there's going to be one client one advisor who's listening going, no, that totally happened to me. Right. I lost a client. He did it on his own. It doesn't happen for a couple of reasons. Number one, they came to your office, not for special, intel, right? To get information. I'm going to go do it on my own. They came because they saw you as a professional, somebody who knows what you're doing. And so they want to come to you and evaluate. They want to kind of get that last feel of like, is this the right advisor for me? And by the way, little secret, most of the time when somebody comes into your office as a prospect, they are not talking to anybody else. There's the occasional client who's going out and shopping and they're going to meet with 3 or 4 advisors. Most
don't.
They're taking one meeting. They've met you at a party or an event. They've come to your website. They've heard your podcast, whatever the thing it is that you're putting out into the world. And they're like, I want to talk to that guy or that gal and go and see what they have. So they've already kind of made up their mind. So you've got a high level of possibility of closing that deal when they're there. The other reason why they're probably not going to go do what you're showing them is they don't know how to do it, right? They're not financial professionals, right? And by the way, that's a pain in their butt. They don't want to have to go through all that work, right? So like that phobia is way overblown. Give away your good stuff. I love it. It's fantastic. One of the things I really wanted to chat with you about, and it's already starting to come through. I love it. I love the fact that I've already kind of getting like what's allowed you to move probably faster than most. I read a stat, and I should have gone back and found out where I got the statistic. And it's I think it still sticks to this day, but this is probably like 6 or 7 years old. But 85% of financial advisors don't make it to year 5. Right. The washout rate is incredibly high. And part of that is the legacy of this industry is most firms hire anybody who can fog a mirror to become a financial advisor, right? Like, hey, sign up. You can become a financial advisor today. You come in, you do your training, you train for your Series 7, right? You get licensed or you don't, right? So a high level of washout in year 1, because some of them just don't pass the test. But once you pass the test, it's like, great. Now go start building clients. And the nature of the business is it's kind of an eat what you kill. So the challenge for a lot of advisors, young advisors or early stage advisors, maybe the age doesn't matter, is they never get to escape velocity, right? They're bringing on onesie twosie clients. As you mentioned, they weren't bringing in the high value clients at the early days. But they struggle to get past year 4 because all of a sudden they're like, I've been doing this for a couple of years and I'm still not making any real money. And then they bail. And I know this is a real industry challenge, right? How do we get advisors to grow before? And I've mentioned this on this pod a couple of times. When I speak at conferences, and I usually speak at top producer conferences for firms, I go to the little cocktail parties. And one of my favorite questions to ask is like, how many years did it take you to feel successful? And these are people who are making $1 million plus a year.
Oh yeah.
And they almost always say 5 years. It was 5. It's like, holy crap, you were so close. Year 5 was when it was going to click. So I don't know, maybe we talk a little bit about like, what are some of the things that you can recall doing that allowed you to rapidly grow your business where you felt it was worth pursuing past year 4? And maybe, some early advisors and maybe some of the firms, the enterprises that have the practice management professionals listening can learn from this as well. Like, what are some of the things that you felt were helping you get there faster?
I wish I would have had a better expectation set up front. If the industry, and I think it's an industry problem, I agree with you that the goal is not just to get people in seats. That's expensive. I've heard people say it's like crashing Ferraris. When you onboard somebody, train them for 2 years, and you almost know they're going to be gone. Like you might as well just go and crash a Ferrari. But so I think going in, you almost need to try to talk people out of the business, and they have some staying power. But there also needs to be a couple on ramps to the business. For the diehard entrepreneur, I'm going to go out there and just make it happen, which I think is a small percentage. I think probably the way it happens now may work for them. There needs to be an onboard ramp through a team. I bring up an advisor every 2 years at least that comes as a paraplanner and transitions in the business, because there are so many great advisors that are technically sound, that are honest, that just can't sell. And if the predominant strength to be a financial advisor for long term is you have to be a great prospector, we're losing probably some of the best financial planners in the industry because they just can't accomplish that. And so I think if a better expectation was set up front of here are the lanes you can take, This one, maybe you make more money faster, but it's the hardest one. But here's other ways to stay in the business and help people long term. I think that solves a big problem up front. The other issue is development. And I bounced around to some big firms early on. And I remember the people that were training me were people that tried to be advisors, but didn't make it. Mm. And that's not a knock on them, but it was like, if a manager is not boots on the ground, challenging himself to grow his practice, like we need the best advisors training the next advisors. And so I've built courses. I'm kind of putting together an advisor community. We can talk about it in a little bit, that it's like, how do we get advisors growing advisors? So I think the onboard needs to be different. And I think the development needs to be different. Developing for the sake of developing, doing the same thing we've always done that doesn't work, it just needs to stop. It's a waste of money.
That's I like that you pointed out the setting expectations piece at the beginning there, because I've talked a little bit about this in the past of, many advisors who have mature practices now, who have been in the business 20, 30 years. They came in when they were called stockbrokers, or the business was much more high sales, right? And many of them were in a commission scenario, right? So the sales guys, the guys and gals who are really good at selling, succeeded, right? Mm-hmm. But in many ways, there is that other category of lane where she's like, hey, listen, I'm a really good financial advisor. I love finance. I geeked out on it in college. Mm-hmm. I went and got my CFP, right? I maybe even a CFA. Like, I just love the analytical part. Or maybe I really like the bedside manner part. I like working with people. Those are valid as well, but they're going to need some help on the sales part, right? That it's not going to be easy for you. The clients are not just going to beat the door down, right? You're going to have to do something. And the same thing over on the sales guys. Like, you can't just churn them and burn them anymore. Like, there's an expectation that once a client comes in, they need to be serviced. You need to help them solve those life goal problems and so forth. That's really, really, I'm glad you pointed that out, because you're probably right. I think a lot of firms are not giving people hey, this is going to take 5 years, right, to get your escape velocity. Once you're there, it's going to be awesome.
Yep. So I think now is an amazing time for people to get in the business, or even pivot to become kind of a new type advisor. So 4 years ago, we committed to financial planning consulting for a fee. Coming up in the insurance world, and then pivoting to the securities world, it was all about insurance products. Then it was all about mutual funds and managed money. And that's how you drove revenue. When we decided to say, our advice is so valuable, we think people will pay us for it, regardless of if they buy anything ever. And my buddy Michael Kitces he's part of this movement of like, hey, fee-only planners, like, there's a huge niche for that. Because now a majority of advisors are chasing this small sliver of the pie of people that have assets to manage today and are willing to move the money to you. The sliver of the pie that people are willing to pay for advice, business owners, or are going to have assets in the future for you to manage, is probably the other 3/4 that nobody's really talking to.
That's right.
And so one of the courses I put together is, how do you become a financial planner in the future, a consultant? How do you charge for your advice? Because we went from doing 0 plans 4 years ago to this year, we'll do $500,000 of financial planning fees alone, on top of our insurance and our investment business. So that opportunity there, if you're that good of an advisor and you can learn how to charge for your time and ideas, I think the average age of advisor drops significantly, and I think the retention jumps. Yeah, we just have to build that model.
I think you're so right on that. I wrote a blog post, and I'm going to butcher the name of it, the title of it, but it was something like looking beyond the 1% to find your business, to grow your business. And what inspired that blog post was I saw a story. It was like something ridiculously small, like only like 10% of Americans have a financial advisor. It's like, it's a really, and like, right. Well, wait a minute. Is it really that small? And I'm like, that's true. And so that means that there is a huge, everybody's chasing these top 1%ers, right? The people who have lots of assets and are making a ton of money. There's this whole other segment of humans, right around you, that are in desperate need for financial advice. And to your point, many of them have not started having liquidity events yet. Mm-hmm. Many of them will at some point in their careers have a lot of money to manage, but they've started a small business, right? Whether it's a food truck or whatever, they need help, right? That you can bring value to them. It's just that you're not gonna be able to earn a lot of basis points on their lack of liquidity.
Yeah, and I mean, think about the value prop. Put yourself in the client's shoes, which I don't think advisors, I struggle with this if I really was honest with myself. And I think I'm getting much better at it. If I was the client, I don't think I would have been a great client for the advisors that are just trying to manage money. I would have been like, it seems like a high fee. Like what's the really value? I own a business, so I have all these other needs, but it seems like you just keep bringing up investments as a solution to everything, or an insurance sale. There's this thing inside of clients. It's like a red flag. And when we go through our meeting process with a client, they say, I didn't know you could work with an advisor this way. I've never heard of this before.
That's interesting.
And an A client for me in the past was $1 million plus of assets under management. Now I have clients that we manage zero assets, but they pay us $3,000-$4,000 a month just to be on the team because they own businesses worth $20 million with amazing cash flow. They'll write big checks for an unbiased person to just sit there and bounce ideas off of. What they don't want, and if you have to show them an alternative first so they even know it exists, is the person that comes in, it seems like every time the solution is an investment product or an insurance policy.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that anymore. Again, the insurance is important. The investments are needed. But if that becomes kind of the dominant topic of a conversation, as opposed to talking about self-directed IRAs, new tax strategies, every client you should talk to them and encourage them to own real estate because we all would.
Yeah.
So why are we pushing them against it? So I think we need to reframe how we're presenting the value we bring. And trust me, we still add 20 million plus of AUM each year. Big insurance cases still come. They might come a little slower, but when they come, they're not jeopardizing the client relationship.
I really liked, and it's so true. It's like, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little while ago, is that, most people didn't study finance, right? And so that they don't know what they don't know. So, and even people who are running $20 million a year businesses, they made their money doing whatever that business is doing, right? It's chances are it's not finance. It is not understanding tax strategy. It is, running a landscaping company that, services the city, a lot of the places in Austin, and it happens to be doing really good, right? Or it's a pool company, right? Installing pools and servicing pools or whatever. It's like, they're good at that. They don't know finance, and they need that help. And to your point, they will pay for solid advice. Let's switch
one more point I'll make there, Mike, is on, I think for any advisor, new and old, we all need to recognize we're business owners, whether you like it or not. And you need to make revenue to enjoy what you do, to feed your family, to have a thriving business. So you need to challenge yourself on what ways you have to make revenue.
Yeah.
And so the master course I put together of adding financial planning consulting to your business is essentially Legacy's playbook from beginning to end, how to prospect, how to sell it. Because if more good advisors that have the technical skills can charge for their advice, I think their business thrives. They'll still get the AUM, they'll still get the insurance. But I would say to any advisor that says, hey, I'm struggling, I know I should be doing better, or I'm newer to the business, but I just can't seem to get the AUM sale, you just got to charge for it differently. Your value is still there. You just have to figure that out.
I like that. I really do. And it's, I think there's an anxiety, right? Because kind of going back to the beginning days of how many advisors enter the industry, you mentioned they enter it in the insurance business or the investment business. Yep. And they're trained to sell, they're trained to bring on clients, and they're trained to how to talk about investing in a variety of different products or plan for the future through investing or through insurance. They're not taught that other business model. And so, folks like yourself who are kind of leading the charge on this, so like, hey, look, you can add this other thing. And by the way, it's kind of going to be important because we've seen fee compression on assets under management, and your clients are going to start to ask more and more questions about why am I paying you this high fee for or perceived high fee for or assets under management. I wonder if shift gears a little bit to the recruiting side, right? Because that is an area where independent broker-dealers, wirehouses, larger RIA firms, even smaller RIA firms are starting to struggle with bringing on younger advisors, right? And it's for a variety of reasons. One of the things that I've heard in talking to younger folks is that Wall Street still has a little bit of a stink in the minds of many millennials, right? That they're so dissatisfied with what they saw during the financial crisis of 08 and 09 that they're not even looking at the investment world. But on the flip side, many young folks, and in fact, some of the folks that I deal with regularly through my business, they're working kind of in gig economy, right? They've got these variety of little contracting gigs that they do, and it's like there's this career path over here that's very good, right? And then once you build your business, it's very sustainable, right? It's recurring revenue, as you mentioned, right? Even on the fee only side, where you're charging a fee for financial planning and being an advisor, a legitimate full-on advisor to a business or to the individual client. It's a very attractive business. what advice would you give to firms that are looking to recruit younger folks, kind of at either at your age now or younger than your age to get them to be excited about the space?
As I've brought in some young advisors, I've read the books, the next generation coming up, how they think, but seeing it firsthand is that they'll sniff out the sell. If it's like, hey, go to your family and sell this stuff. So I think you have to flip it and say it's kind of what's our mission. Our mission is to change lives. At Legacy, we change lives through creative financial strategies. The products are an afterthought. And really to change that is you bring up the products. It just might be in meeting 3 or 4 as opposed to meeting 1. So I don't think the industry's broken. I just think the communication strategies, the training strategies need to be changed. Thinking about myself when I was getting in the business, if it was the money was not the driving factor for me, I think it was the impact. But I also needed somebody to illustrate to me, the money comes and it's more than you think. Yeah. But it's add value first, money second, versus hit your lives bonus, bring on these new accounts, you win a trip. I think if that's how we're positioning the business to new advisors, while that's under attack by fiduciary standard or firms trying to flip the script and they're kind of demonizing the way it's been done forever, I think that's a losing battle.
Yeah. I have heard very similar themes, right, from younger folks, which is that they're much more, and I've seen data like that supports this, of they're much more mission driven, purpose driven in the things that they want to do in life, right? So they don't want to work for companies that are polluting the environment. Classic example, right? So they're thinking much more. Climate change is a very big concern for a lot of folks my age also, but younger folks in particular. And so they want to focus on that. They want to make sure they're doing good in the world, basically, right? So they having a social conscience is important to them. And I've always talked about, and in fact, Tony Steek, who was on the show last week, he mentioned the same thing. He's like, this is a noble profession. When done right, you are helping people, right? You are helping them get better control of their finances. In the end, you're helping them have better family lives, right? Because one of the biggest stressor in a family life is money. So I love the fact that you're like, lead with that. Lead with the fact that this can be a very purpose-driven existence, and you can be doing a lot of really good stuff. And a byproduct is you can make a really good living.
And I think you have to quickly follow that up with a strategy for success. And one great thing about that is the financial planning side of this business, again, isn't going to replace the sales side. We need all the products, and those are going to keep being reinvented and tweaked and great. Yeah. But if you can show somebody that truly all you're charging for is not, hey, here's 4 products, go figure out a way to push it, because that's what's being pushed against. These new advisors are saying, I'm out. This wasn't what I thought. I feel like I'm selling bad stuff to my family members just to hit a quota. Mm-hmm. If we can teach them early on, you are the product, so study well, become so valuable to the client, and then sell those ideas like that. You're selling yourself more than a product. I think if that was what was communicated up front really clearly, and I've been around some firms, I was paid to go and consult, and while they said that, behind the scenes, it was the opposite. I think a lot of firms are saying, hey, independent advice, financial planning, but they're still trying to sell the products off the shelf. A client may not see through it, but an advisor that's onboarded with kind of that mission, and they're excited and they quickly see what's happening internally is different than what's being portrayed. It's game over at that point.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's, people can only put up with that for so long. And that's, one of the other big challenges the industry has is a lot of churn. Right. And so something like 6.5% of financial advisors change firms annually.
Oh yeah.
And so that means like every, 10 years or so, right? It's almost the rule of 7, right? Almost, every 10 years or so, you're going to lose all of your advisors, right? They're going to churn out. So advisor retention is a really big deal. And so making sure that they're happy, making sure that they're feeling like this is a place where they can succeed and do good. Really, really important stuff.
Yeah. I think for the folks that are listening that manage firms, communicating the value you bring is really important. I was at some firms in the day where I did the math, and all advisors do. Wait, so I'm giving up this much of my production, and then I try to balance it out by saying, okay, what am I getting? I pay for my own assistant. I pay for my own office space. The best practice training isn't very good. There's no other great advisors training me. You need to preempt that and help them do the math ahead of time and say, hey, we're getting a cut, but look at all the value we're adding to your practice. Yeah. And I think when advisors get successful, the reason they leave these firms is they crunch the numbers and they say, if I'm getting a 70% payout on $2 million of production, why am I giving you $600,000 a year?
Right.
And so if you don't want to lose those advisors, you have to be proactive with those conversations.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, it's funny. Terry Mullen, the CEO of Truelytics, says that all the time. He's like, look, all this practice management stuff is really, really important, right? People, and it's valuable. We're not saying that at all, but at the end of the day, for a lot of people, they start doing the math. Exactly right. There is an inflection point where they're like, wait a minute, you just made the point of 600 grand. I'm paying you 600 grand, or I'm generating $600,000 that you're keeping of my money. And now I start thinking, like, if I just switch, the same client stayed here, everything about my business stays the same, and I move from firm A to firm B, and it's only going to cost me $400,000 a year, or whatever the number is.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, okay. What can I do with an extra 200 grand? Lots.
Yeah. Yeah. So some firms just make it so hard to leave. Like if you leave, they're going to make your life miserable for 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
Just make your value prop so strong they never think about leaving.
Yeah.
Spend just as much money and time building that. Firms hire me to come in, one of the top young advisors in the country. And it's like, I'll give you 2 practice management ideas and prospecting tools that could double your business in 2 years. Like that's the stuff they should be pursuing versus stick with the same model and then kind of a take it or leave it mentality. And again, not every firm needs to cater their business to every single advisor. They need to have their ideal advisor, but you're almost bound to lose your best advisors eventually.
Yeah.
If all you're doing is catering to the new ones and trying to recruit, if that's your focus.
No, you're exactly right. It's, so much attention is spent on recruiting, and by the way, advisors spend a lot of their time on new clients. Oftentimes they're spending less time on client retention, right? And client expansion, right? So increasing share of wallets. Like I would spend a lot more time there. At a certain point in time, of course, you have to focus on new client acquisition because you got to grow your business. You got to get to a certain point where the business is big enough and sustainable enough, but you do have to focus there on that retention. I want to make sure we get to how firms are using you and the advice and guidance that you are bringing to the industry for advisors. Frankly, that's part of the reason why you're on the show. Obviously, it's like you're talking about this. You're very mission focused, which I appreciate. I want to start with the book a little bit because you wrote a book. It's not uncommon for financial advisors, by the way. I've met tons of financial advisors who have a book. It's a really good marketing strategy, right? It demonstrates, there's something about it. It's writing a book is very similar to speaking on stage. I found if you're on stage, as soon as you're done speaking on stage, everybody in that audience is like, well, that guy's an expert. He knows his stuff.
Credibility.
Right? You must, right? It creates the credibility. The book does the exact same thing. It affirms, some things. It also shows you have a work ethic, right? That you sat down and put the effort into it. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the process for writing the book. It's not easy. I've not written one, but everybody I know who has written one says, wow, a lot of work.
Yeah. I learned a lot on the first one. Yep.
Yeah. But I'd love to hear, kind of the story about how you, how it's shaped you and your efforts to go out there and evangelize these concepts and help other financial advisors. Because look, as you mentioned, you're a business owner, you're running your own business. Part of me goes, why don't you just keep that stuff to yourself?
Good point.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the book process first and then go into that other piece.
You bet. Yeah. I think early on, I think I had a scarcity mentality. I think like a lot of new advisors, like, man, if that guy wins, I lose. And as soon as I realized there's enough business to go around, and it got really hard to see these advisors come into a firm and fail out. I just watched from afar and I'd be like, that just looks miserable. I'm sure they're taking that home. It's not good for their family. And then they're going to jump to another firm and another firm. They think it's the firm's fault when it's really more of there's an industry issue. There's a training issue. And so when I, at 28, was recognized as one of the top 2% of advisors in my broker dealer in the country. And then at 30, one of the top 40 under 40 advisors, people started kind of taking notice and saying, oh, he must come from money, or wow, he's grown up in Nashville. And they're like, well, actually, he grew up in Oregon, moved to Nashville, and in 3 years in a cold market. So I started kind of knocking off these excuses a lot of advisors use why they weren't being as successful as fast as they wanted to be, which I'm sure some were really annoyed by, because it kind of challenges us to be like, okay, obviously there's a way to do it. I'm just not doing it. So what am I missing? And so 7 Mindsets of Success was really my approach to, hey, here's how I approach things. Here's a peek inside Sten's head and why I think I'm overcoming these obstacles, because a lot of us grow up with certain strongholds, mindsets that hold us back, and we don't even know they are. And so really, how do we get in our own heads so we can actually make more successful choices moving forward? And so that led to some big speaking gigs, going to firms around the country, just got around a lot of advisors, which I enjoyed. From a business standpoint, though, it wasn't necessarily the best business book to write because it's mainly for advisors. So I think that was me giving back a lot. Some really cool experiences. The 2 books I'm working on now are more client facing. One's going to be for business owners. One going to be for kind of just the average investor. So I'd say if somebody's looking to write a book, decide what the purpose of the book is first.
Yeah.
And don't try to sell a lot of books. I spent a good amount of money trying to make some list and finally talked to some great authors. And they're like, the books, it's not about selling books. Nobody really makes money on books except for a short list of people.
Sure. It's
your calling card. It's your credibility. And so as I write these next 2 books, I'm applying all the lessons I've learned, but it's about a 12-month process. I think if you do it well, you pre-research, you come up with the chapters, whether you self-publish, hybrid publish, or full-on publish. I'd say 12 months, unless you really want to whip out an ebook pretty quick, but it's about a 12-month process to really get through it.
I'm glad you brought up the part of like, you're likely not going to get rich writing this book. It's likely not going to be even a legitimate revenue item. In fact, it's probably going to be a cost center for you in some respect, but it should be in the marketing and sales, right? Part of your P&L, because handing somebody that book, just like being on stage or being on a podcast or a video, whatever, it is that credibility. It is, I often talk about, we've all heard the people do business with those they know, like, and trust, right? But there's 2 other pieces missing to that. And number 1 is familiarity. I've got to see you frequently to get comfortable with you. That comfort level, right, is required to stay top of mind for me to potentially do business with you. But the other one is a demonstration of competency, right? Do you know what you're doing, right? And so writing and creating high quality content, whether it's a book or something else, can absolutely assist in that. So that's fantastic that you shared that piece. Like, hey, it's a little bit of a labor of love.
It is.
That's really interesting.
But if used appropriately, it can be a great prospecting credibility. Sure. I think people, before they come to your office, they Google you. They see you've written a book. It definitely does something for your business. I'd say have a good intention when you're doing it. If the purpose is just to make yourself more money, that may not be enough motivation to get you through the process because it's going to be hard. And depending on how you do it, kind of expensive. But if you do it the right way, it needs to be good. Don't rush a book that's not good. Eventually, people will sniff that out. You'll look back and say what you learned from it and what it did for your business. It'd be hard to compare something else to it.
That's awesome. How did you go about kind of sourcing the concepts? It's we all come up with concepts, and we it's philosophies that we live by and so forth. How did you? Is it just something you accumulated over time, or did you like have one of those moments where you're sitting back going like, how did I do this? What are the things and that contributed to my success that I could share with others? What was that process like of kind of coming up with the content?
I think the first approach I took was really just content heavy. It's just like, here's a strategy. The challenge I got pushed back on was then they want to know you. Like, what's your story? Share your stuff, share your hard stuff. And so version 1 of 7 Mindsets of Success, people that read it didn't really like it, because it was just too dry. And they're like, you need to infuse it with your personal story. That you don't want people to see Sten on stage and just seem like it was easy for him. Yeah. They want to be like, Sten's a peer. He's done some cool stuff. I want to kind of link arms with him and learn from him, but he's not way up here. And all of a sudden I'm never going to achieve that goal. So as I thought through the book, I just said, what's kind of the realest, truest stuff about me? I had to share single mom, 3 sisters. I had a bunch of issues. I played college basketball and I was a mess. I mean, I would want to fight anybody all the time. And so sharing that stuff, that like, man, this guy was a head case when it came to competition. But if you saw him today, like, how did he get from where he is to where he is now? So I think it was really just being really introspective with the 7 Mindsets. Is you're like, what are my issues? What are my hangups? Which ones have I overcome? Which ones have I not? On the content, the books I'm moving forward that are more content focused on clients, I'm having a conversation with you across the table. Here's the best stuff I got. I'm talking to you like a friend. And so I think with the next 2 books, I'm interviewing a lot of people because I think I know things, but as I get that perspective from other people, I'm like, wow, I thought that was true. It's really not. Yeah. So I think it's just being really intentional about the content and taking probably more time up front than you think to kind of flesh it out.
I love it. Is this something you've been working on? I would imagine you got a little more time on your hands, or at least you're stuck at home a little more. Is it, so you're working on 2 books at once. You're at home during the pandemic. I would imagine, it's providing some opportunity, at least a little bit of quiet. How have you adjusted to the pandemic? I've been talking to a lot of people in the space, and asking how is it reshaping the business. And some people are predicting like long-term changes, right? That it's going to, make advisors rethink just having the expense of an office, right? They just, why not work from home and so forth. How is it reshaping you and your team's approach to the business, if at all?
It has. And I think the downtime was nice because it gave us some kind of white space to create. I got one book coming out in January, and then the next one hopefully kind of towards the end of next year. So the time to interview and really kind of, I think that's sped up that process, which will be, I think, reap rewards for us. We have started building a virtual client experience. One big transition that happened during the pandemic was how people engage with their doctor. Teledoc on your phone is now, all these people were pushing it and it wasn't really adopted. Now it's mainstream. Everybody was kind of forced to say, I don't have to sit across the table from somebody to get the value. Yeah. And I think that's the same for our business. And so we've built within our processes, how do we engage somebody virtually? We have clients now that we've never met, we may never meet, but they're still getting the same value from us. They get their agenda 2 days ahead of time. We send the Zoom instructions. We make sure they have the right technology. We have a follow-up we send to them afterwards. It's just a different experience. And so we spent the time building that out because Legacy's done great in Nashville. In 2 hours within Nashville, we have clients all over the country kind of scattered, but it's like, imagine if all of a sudden 300 million people were open to us and we already know what we do is really unique. Yeah. It's a game changer. And so I think it's kind of helped us rethink who can be clients moving forward.
I love the fact that you hit on something that I've experienced over the last decade, being very active with social media, right? And doing social strategies and so forth. Is you mentioned that having some clients that you may never meet. And I know for many advisors and wealth management firms, there may be a little bit of a shudder, like, what did you just say? You're never going to meet your client? But here's the reality. We're all comfortable with that now. I would challenge anybody who has a Facebook account or an Instagram account or a Twitter or whatever, to go through your network. And chances are there's a healthy amount of those folks that you may not have ever actually met in person.
Yeah.
Right. It happens because you're like, they're commenting on a friend's feed and you're like, oh, that person seems nice. And over time, you just develop a friendship, or you're participating in a group or something that you're interested in. Next thing you know, you're friends and contacts and you're interacting fairly frequently. So why can't that actually happen? Like a legitimate, vibrant relationship with a financial advisor and a firm may not have to be one-on-one. Oh, by the way, the big box, Schwab and Fidelity have been operating that way for a century almost, right? That many of their clients never meet anybody actually at Fidelity Investments. They started either via mail or online and have 100% digital. So there's not much of a leap to think that that's going to happen here going forward.
Yeah, we actually surveyed our clients because I was a little nervous about it. We said, would you prefer to meet with us on phone, Zoom, or in person? And very few, under 10%, put in person as their top choice.
Was that pre-pandemic or
it was on the probably mid to end, as we were kind of saying, what's the preference moving forward? And because most people, it's a kind of an event to get dressed up because people aren't showing up to our office in their sweatpants, to drive to our office to sit down. And there's going to be some of that always. Our business consulting clients, they want to sit down and whiteboard with us. So our office isn't big. It's nice. Yeah. But I think there's great revenue to be had if you have a great client experience. And again, it's not about selling. I said earlier, if you're just that good and the ideas you have will save people money, there's a huge pool of people out there that you haven't even talked to yet that are great potential clients.
Yeah, I love it. It's so very true. I love the fact, and we've been talking about this even before the pandemic, talking about the fact that those younger clients, those millennial clients, would rather interact with you on their phone or their computer. It is a bit of a pain in the butt, as you mentioned, to drive to an advisor's office, to carve a part out of your day, because chances are your financial advisor doesn't want to wait until you get off work and come over there at 7 o'clock at his office. Right. He's got a family. He's got stuff going on in his life. I know I've got kids, right? I wouldn't want to hang out until 7:30 or something like that for a client meeting. So yeah. Via Zoom or Skype or whatever your preference is very, very good.
The clientele that's open for us. Imagine late 20s, two professionals married, making $150,000 plus a year. They'll pay $5,000 a year for an advisor to be there.
Yeah.
They may even manage their investments on their own. They just have a 401k. Those are clients I never thought about before.
Yeah.
But our firm can pick up $5,000 of recurring revenue from somebody that's eventually going to become probably a B or an A client by having 2 virtual calls a year with them and then being available for one-off questions.
Yeah.
I'll take that all day long if we build the systems to do it efficiently and well.
Yeah.
We've had a client pay us $8,000 a month for consulting. It was hairy. I don't know how many of those I'd want to do, but if you figure that out,
Yeah.
clients with investments with us, they were hesitant to make a change. The prospects we had, beginning, middle, and even still post-pandemic. I don't know if we're technically post-pandemic yet, but people's minds are kind of saying, okay, we're someday we're going to get through this.
Yeah.
They're still hesitant to move big assets. They're just saying, let's hold tight. The election's coming up. Consulting and financial planning, those people are still writing those checks. Business owners still need good ideas come tax time. So depending on the makeup of your practice, I think you're more susceptible to big changes, pandemic type level events. Ours is much more balanced. So while we felt it, it definitely wasn't as difficult for us.
I love it. That's really smart stuff. And I'm glad you pointed that out. The fact that like there is business to be had. It may not be just asset management, because that I think you're right. People tend to freeze, right? They tend to either go to cash or they just stop for a second. Like, let's not move anything. Don't make any sudden moves. Maybe this.
That's right. I don't want my statement to look different.
Maybe this will blow past. Really good. Well, I know we're closing out on our time together here, but I have a feeling many advisors, given the fact that you are openly helping other advisors and coaching, and many firms, and we have quite a large audience of executives who are at broker-dealer firms and RIAs and so forth, who listen. They're going to want to get in touch with you, and they're going to find out how can they learn from some of the things that you're sharing. What's the best way for people to do that, to follow up and kind of get in touch with you?
Yeah. So first, I'd say go to stenmorgan.com and take the advisor assessment. I came up with a tool that essentially gives you an advisor score.
Yeah.
If we're all honest with each other, where do we rank? I think we're all competitive, so we're curious. Like, hey, where do I stack up? And I think that'd be a good starting point. And then we give some cool free resources away to that. I think the courses, if you say, hey, I want to get better and I want to learn from people that are already maybe 10 steps ahead of me, I put together a great course, again, teaching you how we did financial planning consulting. When people hear that we went from 0 planning fees to almost over $500,000 in 4 years, it's the opportunities there. They usually get nervous. 1, I don't know how to ask for the fee. 2, I don't know what that deliverable looks like over 12 months. And to your point earlier, why would I give that stuff away? I don't really feel like we have competition. I feel like there's so much opportunity that for another advisor to win just means more clients are being served. I don't think they're taking it away from us.
Yeah.
And then the Legacy Advisor Council is a community we're going to launch, and we'll have it on the webpage, which essentially is you join it and you're in groups with me. We're on 2 monthly calls. We're talking ideas. I think advisors need to kind of collaborate more often than kind of being in our little pockets or even just on an island. And so I think this year I'm really fired up about kind of adding more value to the industry and just giving this stuff away, because Legacy's growing. We got advisors doing really well, but I'm ready to kind of give that stuff back and say, hey, let's shake this stuff up.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, Sten, I really appreciated your time today. It was fantastic having you on the show. I'm so thrilled that Erica reached out and got us together.
No, this is great. I appreciate it.
I have a feeling this will not be the last time you and I do a podcast together, because it was just perfect. We were smooth together, dude.
That's right. I enjoyed it. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, buddy. Okay, thank you very much for listening to the show. I sincerely hope you got a lot of value out of this conversation with Sten. I know I did, and this is honestly something that's a really important topic, and it's something that I have a high level of conviction about, because I've seen it. I've just seen too many advisors wash out. I've met too many people who said, oh yeah, I was a financial advisor once. And you just wonder, like, what would have happened if that person had stuck with it? And as I mentioned in the conversation with Sten, I see so many young folks who are kind of bouncing around and making ends meet with some gig economy jobs. And I know how much this industry could offer those folks. They're really bright. They're college educated, of course. They have a lot to bring to the space and a lot to offer people. And so I really would like to see us bring people in, train them up, help develop them, and help them kind of achieve that escape velocity that they deserve. Okay. So kind of spread the word, share this episode, let people know you liked it, share it with some young advisors or newer advisors. Don't have to be young, but early stage advisors. Let them know that this one is for them. Okay. Huge thanks to Sten, by the way, of course, for joining me today. It's incredibly generous of him to share his story. I love his sense of being on a mission to help other advisors. It's really, really awesome stuff. And as he says, he kind of comes at it with an abundance mindset. And I think that's the right way to go about this. Okay. Until next time, make sure you wear your mask, keep your distance, and be nice to each other, right? Take Sten's advice and example, be nice to each other. All right. We all need it, right? We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya.